Good evening, Des Moines. Welcome to the Doc and Lefty program here on webcast1live.com. This is Lefty coming to you with the perspectives you love from the sides you hate. And sitting across the table with me, as always, his version of foreign policy is calling people names and blaming the president, Dr. Pat Petrosh. Doc, what's up?
Now, quit trying to make me a liberal. That isn't what I do.
Hey,
I mean, you guys are still blaming Bush.
What I would say about the Republic, at least your foreign policy prescription is more coherent than anything the Republicans have done in the last 2 years.
Or anything Obama's done in the last 6.
So there you go.
So anyway, well, we got a pretty good show today. We're going to be talking about Gaza, and we're going to be talking about some of the intricacies in there. We're going to have an update on Ukraine and the rest of it. But the important thing is how were your gigs last week?
Gigs last week?
I did not
have a gig last week, no. I did not.
Well, make something up, dude. We got dead airspace now.
Well, no, I mean they are going to be great when I have them. But right. No, we
What about have you been following my Facebook at all?
You are in my close friends group, and so when you do something, it pops up over everybody else.
Okay, great. So you saw all the stuff about the bicyclists here yesterday and today?
No, that I missed.
Well, apparently there is and God forbid I feel bad for the family and God rest his soul, but apparently there was a bicyclist on the street got hit by a drunk driver.
Oh.
That's like the second one in the last week or so.
Oh.
I think last week somebody who was high ran over bicyclists. And I guess, I'm going to go out on my soapbox a little bit. Don't get me wrong, there's idiots everywhere. All right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least when I'm riding on my motorcycle, I can take a look around. If I see an idiot swerving towards me, I can gun it. All right? I have the speed to be able to get away. But having a bicycle on the street's the same problem as having, really like having the mopeds. You're probably too young to have the moped phase.
Well, no, everybody in my when you can get a moped when you're 14.
Yes.
And everybody in my hometown, all the rich kids anyway, in Lamar's had a moped.
And being in Lamar is a little bit different than being in Des Moines.
Yes.
And running down 63rd Street or 14th on a bicycle. And the problem is it's a question of safety. Now people run lights, right?
Mm-hmm.
People get in accidents. I witnessed an accident on the way here,
mm-hmm.
right? Here's the difference. These people got out of their car. They were shouting at each other, calling each other idiots, and it was all kinds of fun. If that had been a bicycle, nobody would have been having fun. There would have been somebody dead laying on the ground. Bicyclists don't belong on the streets of Des Moines. We have millions and millions of dollars we spend every year on bike trails. Dallas County out there is going to spend $260,000 upgrading some bike trail.
Right.
We just got done increasing traffic congestion downtown by giving them a lane. We made it more difficult to park on Ingersoll so people can visit those businesses there by giving the bicyclist lanes. And I could see if we were in Texas where, you can bike year round, or in Florida where you can bike year round, or Arizona. But we're in Des Moines, Iowa, where bicycling season at most is going to last 5 months. At most. And so we're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars so that we can allow these people to ride on the streets. And the problem is every time in the summer when I'm driving, if I drive more than 3 miles, I see a bicyclist running a red light. I see a bicyclist swerving through traffic. One time I saw a bicyclist go through the intersection, do a circle in the middle of the intersection. This is at a stoplight intersection over in my neighborhood. And then turn around and take off. And what he basically did is 270-degree turn, but he did a 360 and then 270 and took off. Well, if people like that, wind up dead, that's tragedy, but it's also something that we should be using some common sense for. And, today I was Facebooking, remember John Thompson? He was a guy at the other station. He's a big bicyclist. I'm great. I'm glad you bicycle. My friend Scott, he's a bicyclist. He bikes from Waukee all the way out to Redfield to get ice cream and comes back. You know what the difference is? He's on the trail. He's not on the street. That's what the difference is.
And that's
my issue. It's just a safety issue.
Well, it's a safety issue, but I mean, first of all, bicyclists, and I believe this to be the case, and I think that I'm right. I didn't realize we were going to talk about this today, so I don't have.
Well, and I didn't realize either. But when you gave me the blank-eyed stare, I went, "Now what are we going to talk about?"
But bicycle, and maybe somebody can Facebook us or send us a message on Facebook or Twitter, or call into the show and correct me if I'm wrong. Bicycles are treated as vehicles in Iowa. In fact, if you are driving it, I know this because I've had this happen to a friend of mine before I became an attorney. Got pulled over and got an OWI for riding his bicycle while drunk. Bicycles are considered vehicles, and as such, they are considered to be vehicles that are supposed to be on the roadway. So a bicyclist can be given a ticket, can be given a citation for riding on the sidewalk next to a traveled roadway. And the bicycle lane is not so much to allow them to be in the street, it is to accommodate a slower moving vehicle that should be in the street anyway. That's the legal aspect. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is, I agree with you that bicyclists can be a nuisance. However, I do agree with you that it's frustrating for a bicyclist because I've seen it too. Bicyclists who don't obey the traffic and here's the ambivalence for somebody who rides. Remember when you were riding a bike when you were a kid?
Yes.
Riding wherever you needed to go. And I don't know if your dad said this to you. My dad certainly said this to me. Hey, Blake, you got to be safe while you're riding your bike and make sure that you're obeying all the traffic signals and going with the flow and you're keeping aware of all the traffic around you. I didn't because as a kid, your parents teach you how to ride a bike on the sidewalk, which in Lamar's, it's a lot easier to do on the sidewalk than it is in the street because, actually it'd be easier in the street, but because it's a smaller town, there's not as many people around using the sidewalks and you don't have to worry about as much stuff. So you learn how to ride your bike on the sidewalk, you just feel like you're another pedestrian riding your bike on the sidewalk. Yeah. Well, you don't necessarily care about a stoplight when you're on the sidewalk. You don't really think about a stop sign when you're on the sidewalk.
And that's true.
And I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's frustrating and it's wrong, and they would be given a ticket for running a red light as well. But we shouldn't be blaming the bicyclists when they get hit by drunk drivers, because that drunk driver is violating the law much more seriously than a bike is. And I agree.
And I don't. When I grew up, you had to ride on the sidewalk. You got up to the block. You got off your bike. You walked it across the street. You got back on your road. That's how you did it in the city. If you're in the country, you rode on the side of the road. And it's just
that's how I was trained too. It's just different now.
And the other thing is, this is going to be the last point on the subject. If these things really are vehicles, then they need to start paying a registration fee. That's all I'm saying.
That's a different debate. I mean, there's a debate in the legislature, or there was in the legislature about doing that.
Yeah, because we're going to be spending millions and millions of dollars for a sport that's going to last, 3 months in the summer.
Well, and the folks that ride year round, like our good friend Ed Fallon, he's not paying as much gas.
Ed doesn't ride year round.
Yes, he does. He certainly does.
No, because when he had Hatch on, Hatch had to give him a ride home.
Well, he walks or he rides. He doesn't drive.
That's true.
Hardly at all. He rides his bike in the dead of winter.
Anyway, well, and just in case Ed's listening, I let my truck run a little bit extra just to balance that climate change thing for you. Anyway, we'll be back right after this break. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Catch us on Facebook, docandlefty.com, and Twitter. We'll be back right after this break.
Petrosian Associates, how can I help you?
Bertrosh and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertrosh, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the second segment of the show. And if you've been following the news at all, if you have been following, this is going to be, I should start off by saying, every once in a while, my good friend and colleague and partner, Mr. Doctor, not Mr. Mr. Doctor Patrick.
I earned my degree.
Dr. Patrick Bertro. See, we put our lawyers put everything at the end because you never read the fine print. Dr. Patrick Bertroche. Every once in a while, or most of the time, we like to do the state and local thing, and we like to make sure that people know what's going on in their community and the political things that are going to have a more direct effect on their life as they live it day to day. For example, when we had the candidates on from Urbandale, when we're talking about the surcharges and the water taxes and all that kind of stuff, we had a couple of different shows about that stuff, and we think that is really, for your day-to-day life, that's the most important kind of information to have. However, both Doc and I are extreme foreign policy, international politics junkies. I would call him more of on the buff side of it, but I really enjoy it too. And today is going to be sort of an international kind of show, especially because if you've been following the news, if you have been paying attention to the newest crisis, and it seems like the last year and a half, 2 years, it's been one international catastrophe after another, perpetuated by people who cannot seem to stop fighting. The latest one popped up in Gaza a couple of weeks ago, where as a response to and it all started when the body of an Israeli Jewish boy, I believe, was found murdered. I don't think it was in Gaza. It might have been in Gaza, but it was certainly the suspects were Palestinian kids that were suspected. And then, despite every warning and plea to the contrary, it's undisputed at this point that Israeli kids, Israeli youths, young men, went out and revenge killed a couple of Palestinian kids in Gaza. And the response from Hamas, which is the political faction that runs Gaza at this point, was to start lobbing rockets into Israel. Israel is not a country that you lob rockets into. They have what they call the Iron Dome that shoots these rockets out of the air, but it's the equivalent, not to disparage any listeners we may have in the Gaza Strip who aren't able to listen now, obviously, because of what's happening, but not to disparage them, it would be akin to Windsor Heights throwing smoke grenades into Des Moines. And the response has been
it would really be like this. That's absolutely correct, except they're throwing them from daycare centers.
Well, I'll get to that here. I'll get to that in a second, because that makes this more complicated. I'll get to that, but
we wouldn't want a foreign policy complication. That'd be horrible.
You can't have foreign policy without complications. The attack is, the response is just as disproportionate as the attack, and I don't think anybody really disagrees. As nobody really disagrees that Israel has the right to defend itself because we would, and I think that Israel's response to all the criticism that they get is every time this happens, the UN and humanitarian agencies and other countries around the world, except for the U.S. for the most part, while they do say Israel has the right to defend itself and this is terrible and Hamas needs to knock it off, or the Palestinians need to knock it off, they say, Israel, you are responsible for the humanitarian catastrophe that you are now putting your boot on its neck. Like this, it's your responsibility because you're the economic power. You have the bigger military. You can't be doing this kind of stuff. The U.S. that's not our line ever. Our line is always Israel has the right to defend itself, and we'll back Israel up. We've had a couple of weeks of this. They've had numerous attempts at ceasefires. Hamas has rejected the last few because every time there's a ceasefire conversation, there's preconditions to who's going to stop firing first and who's going and what's going to trigger it and how long. It's a mess. It's a disaster. It's a humanitarian crisis where a strip of land, I think that the news likes to call the size of I don't even know what the dimensions for Gaza is off the top of my head at this point.
Square footage wise or square miles wise, it's about the size of Urbandale.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's long and stretched.
Right, 1.8 million people that live just cheek to jowl.
Yes.
And it's terrible. And of course, what complicates this whole thing, as Doc pointed out, is that there are allegations that seem to be pretty well founded. And this is the Israeli line every time. The death toll is disproportionately civilian when this happens. That's not even an argument. But what Israel says and what seems to get verified each time is that while Israel uses its rockets to protect its civilians, the Hamas and the Palestinians use their civilians to protect their rockets, where they're firing these rockets from hospitals, they're firing them from daycare centers and from schools and from people's homes. This time around, though, there are a couple of different things. The UN school that Israel blew up, and Israel, you expect an ally to take responsibility when they screw up, to accept that, hey, this is war.
Yes.
And we messed up. This one, we messed up. We had a guy on the itchy trigger finger, or this kind of stuff happens. They blew up a UN school. The UN says we had the blue flag out. They had our GPS coordinates. We pleaded them with the Israelis for a couple of days not to do this, and the Israelis did it anyway because their claim is because the Hamas was using your school for a weapons storehouse. Because when they go in, and the UN has come and said, look, that's not true.
Well, actually, the UN came out earlier this morning and said, well, in part that is true.
No, they didn't. They condemned Hamas for doing it to any school that was closed. Well, right, because Hamas, there is information that they would go to the schools that are closed up for the season and go in and this is my information is from Sunday. So if you got anything more updated,
because the UN came out yesterday, waffled on their statement that there wasn't anything in there, and then this morning admitted, well, yes, there was Hamas and they had weapons inside this.
The school that killed all the kids, though, that Israel came out initially and said, we have evidence that there were rockets fired from that school. The UN has denied that, and I think they've consistently denied that.
Yeah, well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back right after this. Don't forget to visit our sponsors' websites, LubinusLawFirm.com. BertrosianAssociates.com, Des Moines Anesthesia PC. They have a new number, Halo Capital. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and DocandLefty.com. We'll be back right after the break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
See them here, see them there. You got bad credit? We don't care.
Visit emetroford.com for your guaranteed credit approval. Good credit, bad credit, no credit. Everybody drives with guaranteed credit approval at emetroford.com. Visit emetroford.com today.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the conflagration that has popped up in the Gaza Strip again. Israel is making has their ground forces in Gaza trying to fight house to house with Hamas fighters and other militants, which is exactly what Hamas wants. And honestly, this is the question that keeps being asked of the Israeli foreign ministry and Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is exactly the kind of fight that Hamas wants. Israel, once again, and I think it's because they really have no other option, or they believe they have no other option, is fighting the battle Hamas wants to the international criticism of Israel that Hamas wants. And if Israel is not able to root Hamas out and destroy their tunnels, destroy their rockets, and bring them to heel, even if Israel goes on as a country the next day, Hamas has won this battle. Doc, what do you think?
Well, well, a couple of things. I need to make a correction. It wasn't in a. It was in a school. It was a shelter of some kind that they'd set up. And the second thing is UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon issued a statement that he was alarmed and outraged by the discovery of rockets in a UN Relief Works Agency school.
Yeah,
so,
that's a different place than the one I was talking about.
Yeah, but
that was a deserted building. The one I'm talking about is they had kids in it.
Yeah, and the thing is from the reports on the ground, it's the Israelis were simply returning fire from the school that they had received fire from. Here's a thing from a strictly analytical, cold-hearted look at this. This dust up that's going on now between Israel and Gaza and the Palestinian Liberation Organization
it's Hamas, the PLO.
Hamas,
yeah.
And is basically a housekeeping measure, right? I mean, basically that's what they're doing. They're trying to figure out who's going to go where. One of the things you have to keep in mind is, geopolitics, the geography of the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights. Both of these things have one thing in common. That is, they are tremendous reserve of water. And when you're living in the desert, what's your most precious commodity? That's really what's going on. That's what the fighting is about. When you boil it right down.
You wouldn't boil it down because you want to keep that water.
You do want to keep that water. Thanks. But the bottom line is here's Israel going through the same motions. Here's yet another American president trying to say, "Oh, I'm a peacemaker," in an area that doesn't have any interest in peace. You have to keep in mind that the government there in Gaza, the people they're fighting is PLO and Hamas, and they're not getting along with each other. And in fact, there's a split. Yesterday, PLO came out. PLO spokesman came out and says, "We're going to agree to a humanitarian ceasefire. We're going to I'm speaking for Hamas, and we're going to make sure they follow the rules."
Yep.
This time, because there's been several times when there's Israel going, we want to cease fire for humanitarian reasons, and 3 hours after the ceasefire is supposed to start, there's Hamas lobbing rockets.
Yep.
From schools and graveyards. I mean, I've seen the satellite pictures of these rockets going off. And the bottom line is Hamas, not more than, I think it was 45 minutes later, got up there and says, "This man doesn't speak for us. We're not going to agree to a humanitarian ceasefire." So you have this housekeeping, thing going on over there, for lack of a better term. And the United States has always been involved, and nobody's been able to get them to settle down. The last chance that we had to get peace in that region is when the Israelis had Yasser Arafat, and the United States insisted that Yasser Arafat be released. And from that time forward, this has been their strategy. You can't fight an enemy whose idea is, I'm willing to use my children, my body as a shield to protect the Hamas fighters. Mm-hmm. That's their attitude. You can't win with that. That means your only option to be truly secure is genocide. That's your option. And the problem is nobody in the world is going to stand still for that. The United States isn't. Russia isn't.
Right.
And even when the Russians get involved, and they don't, they stay out of Israel pretty much. But whenever the Russians do get involved, it's never good for Israel. And the other thing that's really been, and we'll get into this in the next segment a little bit, but the United States has not done well with this process under John Kerry. Give Hillary Clinton her due. It's not like I'm a big fan of hers, but she is tough and she's smart and she is an effective politician. And when she went over there, at least she had a goal in mind. And this time, what's going on is just ridiculous. And the problem is we're interfering right now. Twice they've come to an agreement to have a ceasefire that was going to last longer than 24 hours or 12 hours. And each time John Kerry's flown in and somehow queered that deal. And that's not what Israel's saying. Oh, you're not reading the reports I'm getting. So we can talk about John Kerry right after this break. We're up again to another break. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. watching Doc and Lefty every Tuesday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Please like our page. I'm supposed to say that. Jen told me to say, like your page. And so please like it. And docandlefty.com. We'll be back right after this break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
Bertroche and Associates will provide you with a friendly, caring, and confidential place to find help for mental health concerns. We are ready for your call. We are proud to work with military personnel and their families. Our doctor, Dr. J. Patrick Bertroche, provides a full range of psychiatric services for children, adolescents, and adults in a forthright and informative manner while maintaining a casual, comfortable, and relaxed atmosphere. Our licensed mental health therapists provide individual counseling to children, adolescents, and adults, including couples and marital counseling. Visit our website at bertrocheandassociates.com for more information or call 515-334-9484. Our offices are located at 5525 Meredith Drive in Des Moines, just east of Skate North off Merle Hay Road. Isn't it time to talk to someone? Take care of yourself and your family. Contact Bertroche and Associates.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're talking about the Gaza Strip right now and the unrelenting disaster that's happened there. Right before the break, I mentioned that the issues with the ceasefires had mainly been Hamas rejections. At least that's what Israel had been saying. But I think, Doc, you were talking about the specifically when John Kerry, his strategy seemed to be, let's get a quick, let's end bloodshed with no preconditions. Let's just get a ceasefire on the table without any other note. Just stop it now, and then we'll work out all the details later. And it seems like that has really undercut the Egyptians. That's kind of solidified Hamas a little bit with Qatar and Turkey, which we never want to see that happen because we're friendly with Turkey at this point. But
they're part of NATO.
Well, the U.S. doesn't have a great relationship with Turkey, but they're better than they used to be. And also really frustrated the Palestinian Liberation Authority. And I gotta say, all that leads to more trouble in paradise, in the Gaza Strip. Yeah. What do you have what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the truth of the matter is, this is never going to settle down. I mean, in the time of Christ, they were killing each other. I'm sure they were killing each other before then. And it's just the way that area is. I don't think they use religion as a reason, but I don't believe that's what it is. I think it's their culture. They have a lot of cultural conflicts over there. Keep in mind, before World War II and the destruction of the caliphate, I think did that happen after World War II, or is that World War I? The destruction of the caliphate over there. I think that was before World War I. Yeah. So before the destruction of the caliphate, you had Jews going to mosque and worshiping with the Muslims, and Christians worshiping with the Jews. And
there wasn't. If you're talking about how the Mideast was kind of governed, there was no centralized caliphate the way that the extreme Sunnis want to set up, and the no,
there wasn't anything.
That's not
like
what I'm talking. That's not what you're talking about. You're talking about the pre-colonial sort of more tribal
Ottoman Empire kind of thing.
Yeah. Where it's just their central authority and everyone else kind of got along.
And so everybody got along. Everybody did well. And what has happened is through this nationalism that has gone on, and that is the curse of the 20th century. That's my opinion. Not that you can't be proud of your country, but you have to try to get along with people, right? And it's one of those things where it's one thing after another. And the people, and Blake and I like to say this, we don't blame Bush and we don't blame Obama. We blame the Brits and the French because they're the ones who created the mess.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, it just there was no such thing as a strict nationalist identity before World War I and some of the and the end of colonialism. The end of colonialism in the Middle East, when the Brits and the French came in and decided to divide it all up and draw these artificial borders and create the country of Iraq. Now, Iraq as a people, the Iraqis and the Iranians, their Persian heritage, and I mean, all those folks existed where they lived, but the borders surrounding those countries that are now etched in stone were much more fluid back in the pre-colonial and colonial days. It wasn't until after the British Empire was starting to kind of break up, lose influence, and the French were starting to pull back after World War I that they were splitting all these up and setting up these European governments or European style governments to control everybody. And that created, and here it is 90 years later. And after, I mean, we're a dynamic race, the human race is, and we will ascribe meaning to things even if they were at one point more artificial, because at some point, all these sorts of communities that we establish for ourselves are artificial. But there was no real Iraqi national identity. There was no real, and there wasn't in Israel at that point for sure. There was no Palestinian national identity. And now, because of these actions over the last nearly 100 years, now you have 3, 4, 5 generations of people growing up as Iraqis, as Israelis, as Palestinians, as Iranians, creating a hardcore nationalism that did not exist prior to that, and giving rise to all of, well, not to all, but to a lot of this kind of infighting. And there also really wasn't a hardcore Islamic identity. Here's I was thinking about this over the weekend, Doc, and I'm writing about it for the website. What we seem to have now that was kind of propagated by the Arab Spring is the folks in the Middle East replacing one set of autocratic rule for a different set, and throwing off the dehumanizing secular rule that where strong men crushing the people to keep them in line, and replacing it with a religious order that can give them all the sort of comfort that they need from their religion at the same time as they brutalize the population and expose them to reprisals from other Western countries for supporting what we label as terrorist action. To me, it feels like that the West has a very limited role, and the United States, I'm lumping in the United States with Great Britain, France, Germany, everybody has a very limited role to play here, because the people are throwing off what they view as an imperialist style government. The autocratic rules of Mubarak, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, the president of Tunisia, Assad in Syria, all these tough guys, throwing them off, and the Western response of trying to pacify the region now that this is happening is viewed by a lot of these people as, well, here are the imperial powers that set these guys up and supported them in the first place, telling us that what we're doing is wrong. We're not going to listen to anything they have to say. That undercuts American authority. That undercuts UN and Western authority more than any one particular policy point from one particular administration. And I say this goes back into the 70s.
Oh yeah. And my brother Joe just made a point. This goes way, way back beyond 100 years.
Yeah.
There's always been a strong Muslim influence there in the region. There's always been a strong Christian influence.
Yeah, and they live together. But
the one thing that was missing is the strong Jewish influence. And when you carve out this area and you put people in tents that had homes and give them to people you don't even know, that creates hard feelings. And the truth of the matter is, Israel hasn't helped itself. Israel doesn't help itself. They get mad at the Palestinians for doing anything. They shut off the water. They shut off the gas. These people sit around dirty, smelly. They can't even conduct business.
They don't let them out.
No, I mean
Egypt doesn't want them.
No, and it's awful. So this really is a mess. That every president goes over there, thinks they got the solution.
Not until their second term.
Yeah, not until and that is a good point.
Yep.
That's a good point, because Obama's getting hammered here at home about a lot of different things. And his poll numbers are going down. He needs a victory. Here's the problem. He appointed the wrong man as Secretary of State. It's obvious. There's one failure after another after another. And the relations between Israel and America is the tensest it's been in decades. All right. Now, here's what the problem is. Blake said earlier, there's not much that United States or Russia could do or any of these world powers. Well, we're doing exactly that. We are influencing what's going to happen, but it's not going to be influenced in a way that's going to help our ally. When you have an editor of a left-wing paper that is critical of Netanyahu saying this about Kerry and his latest fiasco in trying to get a ceasefire going, I quote, Kerry's quote, judgment and perception of regional events seemed and sounded as if he came from a parallel universe. He claimed to have never presented Israel with a formal offer for a ceasefire, slammed the Israeli media's mischievous reports, and promised that Netanyahu's office will issue a clarification. Well, the bottom line is when you have Netanyahu coming after
not very diplomatic
Kerry,
right there.
No, it's not very diplomatic. And when you have such blunt and direct speak in diplomatic circles, things are terrible. And really, this last time around, the Egyptians who are engaged in Israel's security on the southern border, who they work together with this, right? They're working together to try to keep the Palestinians from bombing Israel. So it's a joint effort. The Egyptians had this ceasefire on the table. Hamas had agreed to it, and Israel had agreed to it. And they were starting to work out the details, like you had said. And then Kerry just suddenly said, I'm going to fly over there and save the day. So he flies over there, presents a proposal that essentially says, give Hamas everything they want, and hopefully they'll disarm, and they won't do anything else bad, and they're going to keep whatever they keep, but we're not going to disarm them anymore. We're not going to say they have to lay down their weapons or anything, which is what the PLO has been trying to get them to do.
Or go into the tunnels.
And not get rid of the tunnels. And they presented this to Israel, and for the first time since they were formed, it was a unanimous vote of this is crap. So they basically run Kerry out of town. He flies to Paris. He invites Turkey, who is an Hamas sponsor, and they invite Qatar up to talk about this thing. So now you have Egypt going like, well, hold on, we had the situation under control. Now the Americans are in here and they just screwed everything up. Now we're not going to have any ceasefire because Hamas said, we're going to hold out for the American proposal, and Israel said, we're not going to do that. Right? We're just going to continue to bomb you because that's what we need to do. So essentially what he did is he showed up, he undermined the Egyptians. He stabbed Israel in the back because we're our allies. We're supposed to be supporting them, and we haven't. And in the meantime, we've made Hamas's position stronger to the point where they can tell the PLO to go, hey, we're not going to have a ceasefire. You can't tell us that. That is an absolute disaster for the area. I'm going to tell you what I think the follow is going to be right after the break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We want to thank our sponsors, Petrosian Associates, Lubinas Law Firm, Halo Capital, and, of course, Des Moines Anesthesia for sponsoring our show. We'll be back right after the break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have any more money. We're in trouble now. Save us! Help! Somebody save us! Somebody help! Help! Save us!
Hi, I'm Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of Des Moines. If your credit card's a little too animated, give us a call.
Hooray! We're saved! Consumer Credit! You're our hero!
If Tom Coates from Consumer Credit of America was your personal webmaster, Tom would filter out all bad debt emails. If Tom was your mailman, you'd never get any debt reduction junk mail. If Tom Coates was a lineman, he'd block any phone calls offering to reduce your credit card debt.
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America, and we're still your best choice for credit counseling. We're local, we're accountable, and we can do more. You make the call when the time's right for you.
When it comes to competition, there really is none for Consumer Credit of America.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We have just breezed through this Gaza conversation, which is really easy to do from the comfortable air-conditioned confines of the webcast1live.com studios in Des Moines, and we certainly don't want to take away or diminish the intense humanitarian disaster and foreign policy what would you even call it? Like a boiling cesspool of nonsense, basically, is the only adjective that I can describe it as. It's a bad situation, but I gotta say, the reports coming out of this John Kerry thing, he just seems out of his depth with the Israeli issues. I mean, this is a guy who's a senator for a long time. He's got contacts in Israel. Probably thought he was doing something that would get a quick fix, but obviously didn't have the situation in hand before he went over there.
That's so to speak.
But
and a brief background on Kerry. When he was a senator, he would often vote against pro-Israeli legislation in the Senate.
Well, and I'm going to make that point about liberal Democrats for years and years have been critical of the response that Israel has had to both the PLO and to Hamas. Hamas hasn't been around that super long, but has been critical of the response Israel has to the Palestinians going back into the 80s. Now, I don't think that criticism is 100% wrongly placed. While I think that any country has the right to defend itself and defend its people from terrorist kinds of attacks, I think that it is a problem when you so tightly restrict an economy and so very, very inhumanely treat a population of people that is on your doorstep. And this is not, I don't think there's much argument that this has been going on for a long time, that you having the economic and military firepower to do whatever you want at all times, you are responsible ultimately for the suffering that happens. Now, you talked about genocide earlier with the Israeli issue. Israel is never going to go in full out into Gaza or into the Golan Heights or anywhere else that the Palestinians might be living around Israel and into East Jerusalem. They're not going to do that because they're not going to wipe that people out. It would
they're not.
It would be. I mean, I think that they recognize it would be the morally repugnant thing to do, but also politically and the perception of it would be terrible for them. They would lose support from every single country in the UN if they did something like that. If they wiped the Palestinians
they already
off.
don't. Well, a couple of things. I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to interrupt. One, because Israel has a moral compass, they're not going to do that. Hamas has no such moral compass. Their entire charter is to wipe out Israel and kill every Jew they can find. That's in their charter, right? Number two, UN has, if you go and read through all the crap the UN accuses Israel of doing, right? I mean, it's every day there's 3 or 4 resolutions condemning Israel for this or that or whatever else. So they don't have any friends except for the United States, really, in the Middle East. And really that's what it is. Now my brother Joe wants me to mention this. He's been to Israel a lot. And if you go to the Muslim areas, there's intolerance of Christians, not intolerance of Jews. I mean, that's from his perspective. Now, for having a couple of my friends travel there who are Christians, they tell me the same type of thing. So I don't know if that's true or not.
The larger point that I'm making here is about the attitude that the political parties have towards Israel.
Yes.
In this sense, and maybe how some of it is being colored. And so the Republican Party has been able to use and I'm not making any arguments as to what's right or what's wrong with the liberal Democrat response to this. I mean, if you're going to have sort of an attitude about humanitarian disasters and that you and I just have a disagreement about this kind of thing. The standard conservative line about any kind of disaster is if the person quote unquote deserved it, then whatever. And that's just a disagreement. And we can talk about that another time. But the Republicans have effectively used that as a political wedge to drive between the Democratic Party and Israel for the last 30 years, as having this completely unwavering Israel could do whatever they want and no one, and we're going to look the other way no matter what it is. Kill civilians. They ran over that Dutch lady in a tank, and the Republicans were, well, she shouldn't have been there, right? So Israel,
just like bicycles on a street.
Sure, Israel does not trust the Democrats and hasn't trusted them for a long, long time, even though the no elected official in the Republican Party is actually of anybody of Jewish ancestry. And the Democrats have a lot of Jews in the Democratic Party.
Well, see, and
that's true. That's true.
And I agree, and which is what kills me. If you're Jewish in America, what are you doing supporting the Democrats who really have an agenda to get rid of Israel? I mean, that's how you have to boil it down.
That's a complete misstatement of my argument.
And I'm not saying that, I'm not arguing with that. My point is Obama has made it so that he wants these terrorist groups incorporated into the governments there in the Middle East. The Muslim Brotherhood into Egypt. I forget what the name of the Libyan ones were, into Libya.
That had nothing to do with Obama. The Muslim Brotherhood was elected by the Egyptians.
And now here we have Hamas and Kerry, who's supposed to be the spokesperson for United States and in turn the Obama administration, saying, well, we'll just give Hamas whatever you want. We're not going to ask them to close these tunnels off. We're not going to ask them to stop bombing. And the other thing is we're going to say, Israel's wrong to go into these cities and try to get them out, but we're not going to give Israel any security. What is that besides taking the side of Hamas? I mean, honestly, where is that going to come from?
You're accusing the Obama administration, and this is not. I am surprised that you would go this far. You're accusing the Obama administration of supporting terrorist groups in legitimate governments when the people of those countries are electing these folks. Hamas was elected. They were elected by the people of Gaza Strip to run the Gaza Strip. The Muslim Brotherhood, elected by Egyptians. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's a good policy to have
but you don't want to encourage but you don't want to encourage these terrorist organizations either. I mean, let's just look at his track record. He's got a terrible track record. Boko Haram finally is on the terrorist list after being told over and over and over these guys are terrorists.
Bush administration to put them on the terrorist list either, buddy.
Oh, so now we're back to blaming Bush.
No,
see, there you go. Blame Bush.
Listen to me for a second.
Blame Bush every time.
You cannot.
Let's get this straight. What you said about Israel. Israel is culpable because it won't accept the Palestinian government that includes a terrorist organization sworn to the Jewish state's instruction. It won't help an organization, Hamas, out of the financial jam because these are the talking points of the ceasefire that Kerry provided, and won't ease a blockade jointly imposed with Egypt that will secure their border. And that means Israel is culpable.
So the suffering of the civilians. So who then is responsible for the suffering of civilians when the political party and the terrorist group that arose from the conditions that Israel initially created to fight against them? Who's responsible for that then?
Well, it would be Hamas, who started the whole thing and will not agree to a ceasefire and keeps breaking the ceasefire.
Hamas would say
Hamas is responsible.
Israel started it.
PLO is responsible. Those are the people responsible. We're up against another break. We'll be back right after this. We're going to continue this argument. We want to thank all of our sponsors. Please stay tuned. We'll be back right after this break. Follow us on Twitter, like our page, Facebook, and DocandLefty.com.
Sermons telling you to reach the lost by demonstrating the kingdom of God on the streets. But has anyone ever helped you do it?
The Kingdom Power Immersion Camp.
It's time for action. If you need help, we'll show you how. Get hands-on training from experienced coaches as we bring the kingdom of God to the Iowa State Fair. We'll work together and help you walk in God's power. Get equipped for a kingdom of God lifestyle as you touch thousands with God's love and power. Heal the sick, prophesy, and walk in dominion. You'll never be the same again. Let Dave and Patty Lockett of Holy Spirit-led Ministries and Andy Hayner of Full Speed Impact and a team of John G. Lake Ministry directors work with you for a lifestyle walking in God's power.
The Kingdom Power Immersion Camp.
August 6th to 17th. Come for all of it or part of it. Don't miss the special student camp August 10th to 17th. Go to fullspeedimpact.com or hslm.us for more information.
Welcome back, everybody. We got a few minutes left in the show where we've been talking about what's been going on in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Certainly want to give some thoughts to. I actually have a client that a new client that lives and works in Israel and has an international shipping. I won't get too deep into it. But has an international shipping business. So certainly do hope that he and his family are okay, because I think this is not something that the largest part of the population of Israel is having to deal with day to day, but it is something that the entire population is thinking and worrying about, and we certainly hope that somebody can think of something to get everyone to put their swords up. That's
Yes.
at the end of the day. That's what
Well,
we're
and
trying
you
to
know, and that's and I agree with that sentiment. Here's what the problem is: you have groups, and Hamas isn't the only one whose charter. I mean, their basic reason for living is to wipe out Israel and kill all the Jews. You can't get peace under those circumstances. Yasser Arafat says we're going to win this war on the wombs of our women, and from that. Every woman's required to have 6 male children, 3 for their own family, 3 for the jihad. That's
and yet
what
Yasser
you're
Arafat
facing.
himself came around close to the end of his life and was killed for it.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. People don't want peace there. I mean, they don't. I mean, it's so ingrained in that culture now that there's, short of removing Israel from there and putting it someplace else, like, I don't know, New Mexico. New Mexico looks a lot like Israel.
Yeah. Well, and you hear a lot of Palestinians, of Israeli Muslims, and Arabic Israelis who say, "Listen, we don't care. We can do business with Israel. We can work with Israel. We need a place. We need an actual country." You don't hear them talking. You don't hear them asking for the world. But in my opinion, this is going to be an unpopular opinion. In my opinion,
Imagine that.
What this comes down to is that you have a conservative faction. It's always the conservatives' fault. You have a conservative faction in the Israeli government that believes, based on faith and tradition, that the artificially created and lines drawn by Ben Gurion and the English Parliament back in 1947,
Yes.
whatever that
Yep.
was, that is the ancestral and biblical homeland of the Jewish people. Israel itself is the actual historic religious homeland of the Jewish people, and giving up any square inch of it would be a betrayal of the covenant that God made with them back when Abraham and his sons were walking the earth. That's what a significant portion of the conservative faction in Israel believe, that faction is so important not only to Netanyahu's coalition, but to any Israeli prime minister's coalition. And that attitude by itself is creating the intractability with this problem because, correct me if I'm wrong, and I completely cede that Muslim-based terrorist organizations like Hamas, Iran, for example, they're not terrorists, but you know what I'm saying, have the Kill Israel charter. I'm not even arguing that. But there is not the same kind of ancestral homeland ingrained in the religion of Islam in the way that it is in conservative Judaism.
Yes, and I agree with that.
There is no Muslim homeland that they're all trying to get to. They've spread out over the region. And so that attitude is that the root cause of this. Well, and the occupation. All I'm saying is that's really what the problem is. That's what's preventing peace. That's the attitude that needs to change.
What the conservatives in Israel?
The conservatives in Israel, the religious intractability. Religion isn't the problem with this. This is a religious problem.
Well, all right. I agree with that statement. I don't believe it's conservatism itself. I think it's when people say we're not going to stop until we kill you, and we're willing to sacrifice 3 of our sons in order to kill you. I think that's
a
the
reactive
problem.
position. That's a reactive position.
I think that's a problem.
I think it's a problem too, but it wouldn't. I don't think it would have happened if there been an issue had this been dealt with 50 years ago.
Well, and agreed. But the other issue is we're dealing with the here and now.
Yes.
The second issue is when you have Americans meddling in this that are incompetent is the only way to describe it, to the point where even the liberal as Israel gets says, listen, we can't have this, and a binding resolution in Israel like this is not going to be something we're going to agree to. That means something.
You got to wonder what he was thinking.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and I'm going to relate this to Ukraine. There's a lot of casualties over there. I suspect the numbers are wrong. All right, because they always come up with the same percentages, the same kind of numbers. When you ever have that, as far as any statistics, you got to be suspicious of it. Now,
you want to do a Ukraine update before we run out of time,
and this is how I'm going to link it. The problem with attacking in Gaza is the same problem that the Ukrainians are running into trying to take these towns. City fighting is horrible and terrible. And you're going to wind up with a lot of deaths no matter what you do.
Israel's fighting Hamas's war at this point.
Yes.
Yep.
And Ukraine is fighting Russia's war.
Yep.
Right? On their terms.
Yep.
I mean, they just, this is the wrong way to say it, but the break for Ukraine came when the airline was shut down. And here's the bottom line for all of this. War is bloody and it's nasty, and if you have to survive, that's what you have to do to survive. That's what you have to do. If Ukraine doesn't take the eastern part of their country, they're not going to survive. It's that simple. Ukraine has been shelling in these areas. They've hit a school. They've hit a nursing home.
Yep.
And that's just the nature of once you send a mortar, a shell on its way, God help you, because no matter how good your equipment is, there's all kinds of variables.
Yep.
Wind, heat, all kinds of stuff. Maybe somebody put up a tower nobody saw, hits it, does it in. The other thing is there's a bunch of heavy fighting around the MH17 field. Nobody's able to get in to investigate it. And the last thing is there's a heavy buildup of tanks and weapons in these cities, but it's not by the Ukrainians. It's by the separatists.
Well,
it's one of these things where national interest is what's driving the conflict in Hamas, in Gaza, I mean. It's the same thing driving the conflict in Egypt. It's the same thing that driving the conflict in Libya that's still ongoing, Syria, and Ukraine. It's all the same kind of thing. These nations have a right to survive.
Well, Russia is now being accused of lobbing its own rockets into Ukraine itself.
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you that America has a lot of technology, and the truth of the matter is I know for a fact back in the middle 80s and late 80s, we had the technology to follow anything in the air 50 feet above the ground. Didn't matter where it was, we could track it, figure out what it was, and all that. So plus you look at Google Earth now, I mean, they're taking pictures. These pictures they're taking from satellites of these Hamas rocket launches, I mean, that's really what's saving Israel's bacon, is they're going, listen, this is what's going on. Now, how come we're not doing the same over in Russia? Because the Russians know we're looking, and they have a lot more territory that they can cover up.
Right. Well, the last point that I would make on this is I think really what frustrates a lot of people and a lot of our listeners, I'm sure what frustrates a lot of our listeners, is that you can't fight wars without armies. You can't talk about wars without politicians. And politicians are going to always have an interest to make things better than they actually are. I think that there's been a lot of and rightly so, there's a lot of criticism on John Kerry for what he did. There should also be some criticism from the Israeli officials that are continuing to claim that they are, just like you said, you didn't say this, but they're continuing to claim that they are conducting pinpoint strikes into Gaza, targeting militants, and that they're not targeting civilians. Look, you don't have to target civilians in a population that close. You'd bring a wide hammer down on a tightly knit group of things. You're going to hit some people. At least be honest with your language. At least say, look, it is regrettable that the duly elected government of the Gaza Strip is putting their population in this situation. We're sorry, but this is what's going to happen. And they're not doing it. They're saying, look, we're pinpoint. It's all really, really precise. The Russians are saying the same thing. The Ukrainians are saying the same thing. At some point, these politicians have got to stop lying and moderate their language.
Yes. Well, and pinpoint for them is different than pinpoint for us. And that's the truth. One last point about this whole thing about the Middle East. I know this thing in Gaza is terrible. These people getting killed. All they're trying to do is live. But keep in mind, when you're criticizing Israel, ISIS has killed about 3 times as many people in there over in Iraq. So, I mean, it's
all Muslims.
All Muslims.
All their own folks. They don't care.
Muslim on Muslim. So anyway, you going anywhere this week? You got
I am.
gigs?
No, I don't, but I do have, we're going to take a little time, visit the family.
That's
my
right.
mom, my mom, who is wonderful, has set up a little family, the first family vacation that we have all taken. My sister, her family, my parents, Megan and I, all going to the Wisconsin Dells for a couple days over the weekend.
Oh, that'll be a lot of fun.
It's going to be awesome.
It's a great water park up there.
Oh, and you know me. There are 3 things that I love: my fiance, you, and water slides.
Yeah, that's right. And you get me wet enough, I can be water slide. So
okay, with that, thank you to Ryan behind on the 1s and 2s. Thank you to my always effective and wonderful co-host and partner in life, Mr. Dr. Patrick. I keep wanting to call you Mr. I'm sorry. I am sorry about that.
Yeah.
Doc Papatrosh. This is Lefty. Thank you to all our sponsors. We'll give you shout outs and love as much as we can.
Facebook,
Twitter,
and Google.
And no Instagram because we're not that good to look at.
No, we're not. We should start taking pictures of Ryan and Jen. That's what we should do. And anyway, thanks to everybody tuning in. DocandLefty.com. Plus, you can find us on YouTube about an hour and a half after the show.
Yes.
All right. Thanks everybody tuning in. We'll be back here next week.
Hi, I'm Representative Tom Shaw, and I love these guys. Both of them.
Love these guys. Get over here. Love both of them.